I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, I am looking at a fairy. This is real. I feel the energy of this being, this person, this tiny person. I feel her energy. I know she's real because I feel her energy. And a lot of Aboriginal cultures believe that a photo is you.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up. And as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. From this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to North Carolina to talk with Amy. Amy, how are things going in North Carolina tonight?
Oh, they're going great. It's a beautiful summer, and I'm enjoying everything about living here in the Western North Carolina area.
I'm really happy to hear that you're enjoying, the summer weather. I'm lucky enough that I get summer weather full time over here in Costa Rica, but I do remember that feeling of like full-blown summer and how great it is. And here we go, my favorite joke I get to make. We can't start any podcast on Earth without talking about the weather. So we've checked.
Oh.
But, podcast tropes aside, Amy, what I like to do at the start of every show is I spend about 1 minute introducing the listener and the guest to the show's experience. Is it okay with you if I do that for you now?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. You never know who's dropping in for the first time, and so I like to keep this consistent intro. The first thing that I like to point out is that as part of the Fascinating Fae dialogue about fairies, I remove the emphasis from trying to convince me about anything. There's so many wild aspects to the fairy phenomenon. Some of the stuff, like we're going to talk about, speaks for itself tonight. So you're in a unique position. You don't have to do much convincing at all with some of the stuff you're going to show and tell tonight. But in the case of many experiencers, they're relying on intuition and interpretation as much as their eyes and ears. And so it can be very, very difficult to really help somebody understand the feeling and the experience of connecting with the Fae. And so I just don't want to make sure that you feel, no pressure to convince me or the audience of anything. The second thing I say is it is brave to come on the show. I do keep all my guests anonymous, but it's still brave to come forward and talk about strange stuff. So I just want to acknowledge your bravery. I do know what it takes to come forward and talk to people, and I do think that it is brave to come on the show, Amy. So thank you for that.
You're quite welcome. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited.
Well, I can really feel, honestly, your energy, like ready to go out the gates here, which makes me feel pretty excited too. The final point I like to make at the start of the show is just to let everybody know that the principal structure of the show is that I'll let the guest have the first long segment of talking. So I'm here to let you get into all that stuff that you were about to jump into when we were offline. I want to hear about the details of what you're doing, how you started doing it, what your thoughts and feelings on it were, all of that context that makes, the imagery that we're about to discuss tonight come to life is A-okay with me. And I'm a big fan of taking more time as opposed to less. So you've got all my time and attention here tonight. We're not in any rush. And with all that said, I'll ask you, Amy, could you be so kind as to, bring myself and the audience into your world here a little bit tonight and tell us what you've come to talk about?
Absolutely. Well, you contacted me because you had seen a photo that I took and that I had shared online in several groups. I also have that photo on my TikTok channel, which is not all fairy, but a lot of fairy. And, I began taking these photos. I'm not trained as a photographer by any means, but I was taking them with an iPhone 16, and then now I have an iPhone 17. And the way that I got into it was during the pandemic. How many stories nowadays start with that? During the pandemic, I was staying at home and I was online a lot, and I found this little website over in England that had been operational since the early days of the internet. So back in the CompuServe and AOL days. And it's not even around anymore because I tried to find it recently and it's you can't find it. But this woman was teaching people how to see fairies in their photographs of nature. And she went through all the steps on how to take a photo, how to zoom in, what to look for. And so I just went outside. I was living in the western part of the state of Florida. And I went outside and started taking photos of all the beautiful flowers. It's so beautiful there in the summer. This was late summer, I guess. And I found my first fairy. And, some of them aren't as clear as others. And during that time that the pandemic was going on, we had moved from Florida to South Carolina. And we moved into this beautiful house with a large yard, and there was a hill in the backyard. And so I, was getting more and more into my spiritual awakening and into seeking information about fairies because of that website. And, having a lot of realizations. And I went outside and started taking my photos. And there's a fence line on that property that adjoins with the other property. And so I concentrated my efforts along the trees and the little hill and the fence line because, according to a lot of people that have worked with the Fae or believe in the Fae, fences and gates are sort of a liminal space. It's a place where the veil, if you will, is a little thinner. And lo and behold, I got the most beautiful, clear photos. And the very first one that I took in that property was the one that you saw, which is my little fairy lady peering out with interest, with a little fear, with a little curiosity, around the edges of the grass. And I think you said you're going to put that photo in the show notes, so everyone will be able to see that as well. And I showed it to my husband, who is quite the skeptic. He is not like me at all. We're polar opposites. And he was really struck by what he was seeing. He said, I don't believe in this stuff, but that photo gives me pause. And I started taking more and more photos. I have so many now. I have hundreds. And some of them are really good, like that one. It's really easy to see, the being. And for me, I'm clairaudient and clairsentient. So I get a knowing when I look at photos, that I've taken of nature, and I'll know where to go on the photo. I'll know that, yes, that is a fairy. I will feel that fairy's emotion, like I said with the one of the lady, I could feel the curiosity as she's peering around the corner. And I began to get to know these fairies. I set up a little rock in that area and I put little offerings out for them. And, I experimented with it. I researched. And what I found, they love food offerings if it's something you prepared with your own hands. They love wine. They love, I would take little acorns because these fairies were very tiny. And I'll get more into that. But the ones that look humanoid, if you will, if we could use that term, um, they're tiny humans. And I've actually been told by the fairies later that they are tiny humans. And they believe that. They believe they're just a very small version of us. And those fairies were the ones that lived on the hill, but there were many other types of fairies. Some look like animals a bit, although the fairy animals are much more highly evolved than than maybe 3D or, our animals. Um, and some of them look like, sticks, basically because they're behind the veil. They will take on the appearance of the surrounding nature. And some of them actually look like they're made of sticks or, leaves. And that's how I kind of got into it, and I started to just get so excited and take more and more photos. And I started speaking to them and asking them to be in my photos, and they obliged. In fact, I have this one photo that I'm not allowed to show anyone. They said that they would appear in the photo standing in a line. And this was the king and queen of that area. So all of the little fairy villages will have a leader. And, sometimes they're called a king and queen, but it's just for that little area. And they actually got in the photo and it's so clear, but I'm not allowed to show anyone that one. It's so funny. But that was just to show me that, yes, you are really seeing this and this is real. And I began working with meditation. And so they began to communicate with me in meditation, in dreams, and oddly enough, in automatic writing. I found that automatic writing was a really wonderful way for me to be able to communicate with them and to get information and to talk back and forth. But that's kind of where it all began, was in that little property in South Carolina during the pandemic.
Amy, wow, I'm super interested in everything that you have to say here. Thank you for diving in with that much depth. That's great. I feel like I'm right in the pool with you. So let's go swimming. Is it okay if I ask you just some questions that are coming to my mind?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Certainly, though, we're just putting a pin in it. I want to carry on with some elaboration on many of the experiences that you're talking about. But let's just kind of go back to the beginning for a moment, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you're describing finding this website. Do you by chance remember the website's name? I would be remiss if I didn't ask on behalf of the audience who might want to know.
I was trying to think of it. It was fairytastic.uk. something. So fairytastic.
Okay, that's more than enough to get people there. And I'll do a little, internet sleuth stuff when we're finished talking myself to try to make sure we've got the right link. So, okay, now, aside from the fact that you were at this website and it got you, thinking about this process of seeing fairies in your photographs, I want to ask about that in a second. But before that, what was your interest level in fairies?
Well, I suppose have always loved anything to do with nature and beauty and, trees and flowers. And so, I was going through a spiritual awakening, and I had 14 years ago, I had gotten sober. And so I had been on a spiritual journey all of that time. And that led me, it's so funny, when I was going through recovery in my early days, I was given a book. And that book was called, I actually have it in my hand. It was called Healing with the Fairies. And that was my very first interest and knowledge of fairies. It was quite by accident that I was given this book. And the author of that book was Doreen Virtue. And so she has since eschewed all of her, you know, teachings on supernatural things because she has, I guess, adopted a different religion. And so she says that all of this stuff is not true anymore. But her book resonated with me so powerfully. And I was going through this I'm talking about first 3 months of recovery. And I got this book and it started teaching about the fairies and how you could see them out of the corner of your eye by softening your gaze, and how they were basically the caretakers of the earth. And I forgot to say, when I got to South Carolina and I started interacting with the fairies, one of the major things that I did, and I want to emphasize this tonight, is that I began cleaning up the earth around me. I began picking up trash. I began nurturing the plants and flowers and trees, speaking to them, singing to them. And when I did that, that is when they literally opened their arms to me and the fairies began to communicate and interact with me.
Huh. I have full body goosebumps as you describe this part. I determine you're very authentic. So congratulations on 14 years of sobriety. I'm just hitting.
Thank you.
I just crested 3 years myself.
Awesome. That's a big turning point. 3 years is awesome.
I struggled on and off with alcohol addiction as a result of like heavy duty traumas in my life for a long time. And I had been 7 years sober, and then the police nearly killed me. And that set me back on a 2-year, off the wagon situation. Yeah.
I get it. It's a coping mechanism. We all have coping mechanisms. Some just are healthy and some get out of our control.
This is all accurate. Yeah. And, I'm not sure how much of the show's catalog you've digested, but the themes of personal recovery are very apparent in the catalog amongst many, many people. And so I've never really been able to exactly throw a thumbtack in it and exactly pin it, but somehow a strong person who is embracing their recovery is appealing to the Fae, it would appear. Or the act of self-courage and knowing oneself brings you closer to a place of contact. Or I don't know, but there's something about traumatized and recovered people that is a theme throughout the show.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And I get it. And I have attended meetings with 2 other women, and we have actually spoken with the fairies, and they've been teaching us about the way that they live. And one of the things that they told us once, and this is what I thought of immediately when you were saying that just now, they say that the fairies can see our auras. They can see a light from within our third eye. And so I believe that when people are beginning to shed these addictions and, like you said, have courage and show these positive kind of, attributes, I think the fairies can sense and see that. And fairies are very curious. That's the other thing that the fairies have taught us. Everywhere you are, if there's nature around you, even in a park in a city, there are fairies. And they are so curious about humans. They are endlessly curious about humans. There are fairies in our houses. That's true. So these fairies are very curious about what goes on in our life. And because they can read our auras and sense our emotions and sense kind of whether we are engaging in good or, if you want to say, bad behavior, they know. And so they know these things. So I'm sure that has something to do with it.
I have said over and over again on this show that they know your heart. They absolutely know your heart. Mm-hmm. You know what's funny, Amy? What's funny to me is that if I had, say, like, heard you talking as I randomly scrolled through some podcasts, say 7 years ago, right? I would have come across this section of this interview and I would have rolled my fucking eyes. I would have been like, oh my God, what is this new age bullshit coming out of this woman's mouth? But the shocking truth is that you are just absolutely accurate to everything I've learned after 3 years of investigating and discussing fairies with people after I saw one in 2019. And as I listen to you, I just know, like, you're right onto it. You totally get it. So, okay, that really sets the stage incredibly well as context for listening to you as you go on to describe everything next. So I love that you kind of got that book at a random stage of your, recovery process, and it planted a seed.
It did.
Later during the pandemic, seeds, you never know how long they're underground before they sprout. So you finally kind of get some water on that seed with this website. And so the woman is basically describing a class or a structured learning thing about how to go out and see fairies in your photographs. What were some of the tips that she was sharing?
Well, one of the things which I always tell people when they ask me about how to take the photographs is ask, talk to them. And you can talk to them with your mind because they are very telepathic. But for me, it was just better to speak out loud. So when I'm out in nature, I was very fortunate that I am surrounded by a lot of nature and beauty and mountains. And when I'm out there, I speak to them. And my parents live on my dad now, my mother's passed away during the pandemic, but my daddy lives on a property that is a family property in the mountains of North Carolina. And it's quite large, and there's a trail up on the mountain. And I have discovered where the fairies live. Like there's a little village next to our cabin, and so I've gotten to know those fairies quite well. In fact, they've even taken care of my plants for me, and they planted all these glorious violets everywhere. The year after we started communicating with them, and basically, I told them, I said, I am the human caretaker of this land. And I don't understand everything about your world. I know this is your world, but I want you to know that I am an ally to you, and that, I want this to be a place that is safe. And I want to use the knowledge that you are giving me, to protect the land and the earth, because that's very important to me. And I have found with every single group of fairies that I've spoken with, one of the biggest interests of theirs is humans who want to help preserve the earth and who want to be taught. They know, because they've received prophecies, they know that one day humans are going to work with the fairies again. And they believe that's starting right now with people like me, some of the friends that I have, some of the people like you, that is sharing this knowledge. And they know that one day, just like in Atlantis, a long time ago, fairies and humans lived together in harmony. In fact, in Scotland and Ireland, during this early 15 and 1600s, the humans lived in complete peace with the fairies and worked together. And, various factions of religion sought to undo that. But so that's why when you go online, if you're just starting out being interested in fairies, you go online, a lot of the things that you're going to read in the folklore are not always completely the truth. They have been slanted in 1600 propaganda, toward the church and fairies being mischievous or evil. And yes, they can be mischievous, but that's not exactly the whole story. And fairies have free will, just like we do. They have made that abundantly clear to us. There are fairies that choose to be more mischievous, but for the most part, a lot of that stuff has been grossly exaggerated, and even perhaps, untruths have been told about fairies. So I want to make sure I say that.
I don't know what's up with you, but every word just about out of your mouth is just sending me on a goosebump roller coaster ride. You're kind of like, without, because I know you have listened to a few episodes, but I got to tell you, Amy, you sound so much like me. All these hypotheses and guesses that I've been making intuitively from aggregate data, you're just kind of feeding back to me like this stuff. So I want to get into how you know it in a second here. Your meetings with your friends and the contact you're making. You sound so much like Bonnie and Therese, honestly.
Oh yes, that's my friends.
Oh,
are you the podcast they were on?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I suspected, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I was going to go back and look because it was quite a while ago. Wow. Yes, Bonnie and Therese are my dear friends.
Oh, Bonnie and Therese are the real deal. And yeah, they were on Fascinating Fae season 1. And honestly, the two of them, this is such an interesting full circle moment. Wow.
Yes, that is so amazing. And the thing I love about the three of us is that a lot of the information, Bonnie, of course, is more, she kind of started this earlier, and then Therese came in, and then I came in a couple of years later because we met online. And They had never invited anybody to the groups because, it's they wanted to protect the Fae and to make sure that the right person, would come into the group. So it's been the three of us, and we have learned a lot of this information from the fairies themselves without having any prior knowledge from folklore or the internet or books. And then we've gone and kind of I did a big deep dive into religion and the fairies, and found out so much stuff that went all the way back to, like I was saying, the 1600s. And it is really fascinating because some of the fairies that we've met have chosen to practice a sort of human religion. Of course, it's a very fairy-like way of practicing it, but that's what kind of got me interested in reading and learning about this. And I actually did a presentation to them, and they thought it was absolutely wonderful because even Origen of Alexandria, he talks about the fairies. And he believed that they were the caretakers and guardians of the earth. So basically, the way I always tell people is they keep the seasons moving along. They keep the water bubbling. They keep, the plants growing. They are responsible for the cycles. And so humans coming into the picture with, modern technology and all of these things have kind of upset the apple cart, if you will. And so the fairies notice that. And that is why they have looked for people like us, like probably a lot of your listeners, like you, that are willing to begin to understand our place in the world and how, we are responsible for protecting Mother Earth and nature and just being a part of things. One of the things early on that they told us was, if a tree has to be cut down for safety or for whatever reason, let the fairies know, let the tree know. Trees, they are not like humans. And we always want to, what is the word? Anthropomorphize, plants and trees and animals. But they are not like us. Trees know what their calling is. A tree fully exists in its calling, in its destiny, fully. And they know that one day they will be cut down. And they know that they will go on to something else. They will become something else. They will return to the all. And so trees understand that in a powerful way. So they're not upset with us or mad at us if we have to remove one because of safety so that humans can, live and operate. But we have a responsibility as humans to be very conscious of everything that we do. And I think for, Americans, I'm from America, I think that we really waste and abuse a lot of these things as a people. I'm not saying specifically. And, that was even shown to me recently by some of the players that came over for the World Cup. They were just blown away by how much we had, how big everything is, how large our servings of things are. They were blown away by our stores like Sam's Club or, these big box stores. And so I think that Americans uniquely need to be conscious of nature and our place in the world. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that I think the fairies have taught me.
Amy, I'm still kind of just digesting the fact that you're friends with Bonnie and Therese and you're in that group. That's a really interesting synchronicity.
Yeah, because we've been a very secret little group. We haven't been too much out there, we've done that mostly to protect the fairies and to make sure that anything that we say, is fairy approved.
Your photograph that we've referenced here a few times, I'm just going to describe it in a little bit of detail because I've had the privilege of seeing it. It's a close-up shot of grass, like very close up, like to the point where you're looking at the root level of grass. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Much like your husband, that photograph immediately just burned into my eyes. I was like, that is a small female with like a little ponytail high up on her head, like a bun almost, with long eyelashes and a pretty little face, and just poking her head around the grass to take a quick little shy look. And I've never seen anything that I would consider that immediately recognizable and clear. and contextual. Like you're saying, they're very, very small humans. I gotta say too, Therese has one shot that I'm obsessed with of that. Like it's a close-up of a potted plant, I believe, and there's kind of like that stringy green man shape.
Oh, yes, yes. That's a good one.
That's a very good one, because there's in no universe in which that is part of that plant, and you can clearly see this is like a man made of the essence of that plant's auric energy, for lack of a better word, and it's like existing between the leaf parts that are separated by air, but it's standing right there. So it's so remarkable to me that some of the most compelling photography that has actually come forward has come from you and Therese, and you're both part of the same group. And as I listened to you, I had no idea that you're associated with Bonnie and Therese.
Yeah, I didn't even realize. I kind of thought, I was wondering if this was the one, because I know there's a couple of different fairy podcasts that are fairy oriented, but I'm so happy to know this because I really enjoyed their episodes so much. And they were the ones before I came into the group that received the knowledge about the prophecy that was given, and about Atlantis, and kind of about the progression through time. The fairies after Atlantis had a lot of fear because they were being hunted, literally, because of their essence. So, origin, and also it was another ancient writer, believed that the fairies were somewhere in between humans and the angels. So kind of like a little of both, perhaps, or somewhere in between. And they live, according to our fairy friends, in sort of, I always say, a little pocket, dimension, a pocket world. But they have been very clear to us that the sun and the rain fall on them just like they do us. So however it's set up, pocket dimension or otherwise, they're in our 3D earth, and they receive the sunlight and they receive the rain, and they are able to move through the world invisibly, or they can allow themselves to be shown. Now, I am probably 95% sure that if they appear in a picture, it's because they chose to. And especially ones like this. And that's why I always ask them to appear in my photos. And usually, like several of the ones that I have, they will have a little bit of, angst, a little bit of curiosity, but they still will show their faces. And it's because, they have been taught through oral history about Atlantis and about the fact that certain humans, chose to practice dark sciences and arts, and they needed the essence of the fairies. And so, they were hunted down. And unfortunately, because they have free will, some of their own even, turned them in to these people. And that kind of was a large part of why Atlantis fell. So they have known that there will come a day, obviously thousands of years later, that the fairies and humans would work together again. So they used to be quite united. Like even over in Scotland and Ireland, they were very united with certain families. And I found written evidence, and I'll have to find it for you, but there is written evidence that some of the fairies came over to America with their Scottish and Irish kin, basically. And there were ones here as well, because the Cherokee in this area have extensive oral history about the little people. They call them the little people. There's so many names for them: the fair folk, the kind folk, the little people, as the Cherokee call them. And the Cherokee said, and this is what I find, I love when things synchronize like this. The Cherokee say that they are small Cherokee. I didn't say that. The Cherokee said that for, hundreds of years, that they're small Cherokee. And they have so many beautiful stories about how they helped children return home that were lost in the woods. They fed travelers when they were hungry and lost. And they loved to dance and they loved to sing. And it's just fascinating when you start to look through all of these different groups in America and realize that so many of the Native Americans had amazing stories about the little people.
This is not the first time we've met. I agree with just about everything you're saying there. It's fascinating to listen to you because not only did you kind of like intuitively tip me off that I should mention Bonnie and Therese, but there's this one thing that I've always kind of like struggled to get my head around with the Bonnie and Therese episode that I'm feeling again here with you, and I've kind of just had an aha moment, is the three of you are so bursting full of information about this that it is kind of hard to contain within you. And I feel that in a really positive way.
I get that.
It's totally authentic. For that reason, let me help you with your storytelling here, because your journey is equally as fascinating as all of this information.
Okay.
So I'm totally with you, but there's a missing piece here between you going out and taking photos of your fence and seeing a fairy, and then, eventually meeting Bonnie and Therese. So let's fill in some of those missing gaps.
Okay.
Here's some of my questions to kind of help along with the narrative here. So, okay, you're on the website back in 2019. You're like, fuck it, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go outside and take photos of fairies. What an interesting instinct. Were you expecting results? That's my first question.
I don't know if I was expecting results or hoping for results. I thought, well, if this lady says this is true, I have to see. And I remembered my book. I went and pulled that book out because I still own that book today. And my dog chewed on it and ruined the binding. And I have it in a plastic bag because I'm not ever, I want this book forever, because it was such an important part of my recovery story, because she also talks about trees and the healing of being out with trees. And that is something that I did at that time. So I'm sure that the fairies were getting to know me and, getting my vibe. And then I went out and took the pictures, hoping that I would find some. And I scoured my pictures just like I was instructed. She would say to zoom in, because she said the fairies are very tiny and they are behind the veil. So they're going to appear to be made of leaves and trees and bark and things like that. And one of the other things that the lady said on the website was kind of orient your camera toward the ground and the base of trees and the base of plants, because that's where you'll see the most. And that was a really good starting place for me, because that's precisely where I saw the fairies first. Now I can see them higher up and sitting on tree branches, and, they live in trees. So trees are one of the village places inside the tree. In fact, a tree told me, because I've since, with my clairs, learned to speak to trees. Trees are very communicative, by the way. And a tree told me that the fairies are a part of me and they are in me. So in a way that lets me know that all of us are connected through an energetic, web, basically. And I've learned so much since then. But if you're starting out taking the photos, you should orient your camera toward the ground and toward the base of trees, because that's usually where the entrances to the fairy villages will be, around the base of trees and their root systems. And I've always found that hills, if you have a gentle hill on your land, or a bank of some sort, even in areas that don't have mountains, that is often where they will live and be. So, and I always worried that I would step on one, but they say they're quite adept at not getting in our way.
Okay, so you go out, you get your first photos, and you come back and you see one. What was your thought when you first saw that first fairy in your photo captures?
I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, I am looking at a fairy. This is real. I feel the energy of this being, this person, this tiny person. I feel her energy. I know she's real because I feel her energy. And a lot of Aboriginal cultures believe that a photo is you. And this is all about quantum physics, really. But a photo is us in a way. It is connected to us forever. And in that photo of that little fairy, I felt her energy and knew that she was equally curious about me as I was curious about her.
Are we talking about the one in the grass that we've been referring to this whole time?
Yes, that was my first really clear one. So I did see some that weren't as clear before that.
But still, I can imagine what that must have been like to come across that photo. And I'm going to say, Amy, I also will offer that I feel the energy of that little entity as well. And here's how I know that that's true for me, because one of the first times someone ever sent me a photograph that made me feel weird and get kind of confused as to what was going on with my reaction to this photo was Danielle Paul, the woman from episode 22 who made my glasses move. What she did is she reached out to me initially by sending me an email, and I guess she had like made a mistake and she meant to send an attachment. So she sent a second email with the attachment, and the attachment was a picture of one of her dolls. Now, I got to just explain that, because what happened is I opened up my email, and the very first thing I saw was just this email with a picture in it from someone named Danielle, Nature Spirit Creations. And I open it up. I haven't read the email yet, because she sent the email before and I haven't opened it yet. This is the fresh email. It's this attachment she sent. And it's just this picture of her doll. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, really starting to look at this doll, and I can't even like begin to look away. And I'm like, what on earth is going on with me? I'm doing too much Fascinating Fae. Like you know what I mean? I've dipped into my own supply too much here. Like I've lost my unbiased mind. But, I then read her email, and long story short is I eventually, several months later, go on to interview her. And as she is describing that doll that I was transfixed on for no reason, a pair of glasses lifts up and floats and drops next to my face, and my ball mouse does a few moments later.
Wow.
The ball actually popped out of my ball mouse and dropped on the opposite side of my face, because I lie down when I record because I have a spinal injury, so I'm flat on my back as I do this. Now, that was one of my craziest moments ever in the show, and started off for me, a bunch of events that have unfolded during the production of the show that defy reality, break reality, whatever. And a lot of it's been, I've been super fortunate enough to capture live as we're recording. Now, when I saw that photo of that fairy in the grass, I can't even remember where I first came across it, but it just stopped me in my tracks. I was like, that's a real photo. I just knew it immediately, and that same transfixed feeling kind of came over me. Now, of course, in the past 45 minutes, I've come to find that you're friends with Bonnie and Therese. And so there's so much that I didn't know, that I intuitively was just snap-on drawn to, and that now as I listen to you talk, I'm like, holy shit,
That's amazing.
I'm really starting to believe people like you and others who talk about what they're seeing and how they're feeling, like you're talking about. Like, I give you full validity. I agree with you. I can feel that little thing. It's more than just, oh, that's a picture of a face. Like, you can absolutely pick up her vibe somehow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have another photo of a little gnome. And I took that photo under a mushroom, a tiny mushroom. And it's so clear because there's a gnome and there's a little fairy that's leaning down on her chin, like her chin is in her hands and she's looking at him. And you can see some sort of white something in front of him that was not present in the picture I took right before. And it's like, I don't know if it's smoke. That's kind of my theory, that it's some kind of smoke. I like to think that the little fairy has got her chin in hand and she's saying, come on, let me have some, and it's so clear. This little gnome is so clear. And I have taken multiple pictures in different locations of little gnomes that look exactly like that with the little hat. And it's just mind blowing to me because you can feel the energy of these things. And he's grumpy. He's a very grumpy little grr. And I read in the book, the original book by Doreen Virtue, my fairy book, Healing with the Fairies, that gnomes live under mushrooms in your yard. So if all of a sudden a mushroom appears in your yard, or a series of mushrooms, a mushroom ring, because often they're in rings, that means that gnomes have taken up residence in your yard as guardians. And if I see mushrooms, I do not cut them down, or I'll leave that area uncut, in my yard, because I truly believe that after seeing that little gnome underneath that mushroom.
Okay, so like I just talked to this woman, Harper, and she had fairy rings pop up in her yard, and then a bunch of stuff, moving around and disappearing in her home. and she did a ritual. And then what happened next is that after the ritual, over the series of the next 3 days, she had a shiny penny from 2007, which was unmarked, slip into her shoe while she was walking on 3 separate days.
You know what? They love our coins. They've told us that. that does not surprise me in the least, because they told us that for some reason they are endlessly fascinated by our coins. So one of the best gifts to give them, if you have like a little fairy altar or a little spot where you leave gifts in your yard, is coins. So that does not surprise me in the least. And they were probably saying sorry, because a lot of times they get so excited. And so, it's usually the young ones. This is what we've been told. It's usually the young ones that will take things, and they're not stealing in their mind. They're just so fascinated by it that they take it into their reality. And so if you ask them, she did a ritual which let them know, what was going on, but you can actually just tell them out loud. You can say, hey guys, could you bring back such and such? And usually the elders will go and be like, okay, take that back, and it'll reappear. But that is so funny about the coin. I love that. I would, to me, I love numbers, so I would be fascinated to look into what 2007 represented, and also to see if it represented anything for her specifically.
The 3 coins, also there was like a incident with her husband who had 3 gift cards removed from his pocket. They couldn't find them, and they later found them under a water bottle, fanned out directly center place on the windowsill.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and no spoilers, but this will come out later, so it won't be spoilers for anybody but you. But I also just recently talked to another woman who, just to quickly add, there was also another woman I spoke to who had a gift of a coin from India, bright and shiny, from like 10 years ago, just appear mysteriously in her kitchen. And it wasn't just that, like she came home and her kitchen had been cleaned and everything had been like put away. Mm-hmm. And in the center of the table was this shiny penny from India. What the fuck? You know what I mean?
That's amazing. And those are house fae, and they will clean for you. They really will. Like if you're somebody like me who struggles with, I don't struggle with my house being dirty, but I like my things around me. I'm a Cancer, so I love my house around me, my books and my crystals and all of my stuff. And so I'll ask them sometimes to just help me keep it tidy. And I talk to my house too, because that's another thing. Houses do have a measure of sentience often if people have lived in them for a long time. And so I always ask my house their names and they tell me. And usually I'll look the name up and it will represent something that makes perfect sense for that house. And that is so amazing. And, most houses, especially older ones, do have fairies living in them.
Here's another one too, which I forgot, and I'll say now. So what I was getting to, I remember now where I was going with my thought process. The woman I was speaking to a couple days ago, she, just a second here. That was weird. Okay, I'm just going to check my audio. Mm-hmm. It's funny. We're getting close to the truth, and then the audio is like, doop, doop, doodle, doop, doop, doop. Okay, then I'll just maybe keep that in for the editing process. I just watched my audio software glitch in front of my eyes, but it does seem to still be working. So anyway, this woman was like, had a experience when she was a child. Her mother used to make figurines. It's so much like Danielle. It's funny. And she was a young girl, like 11, and she said, I don't know, because the mom used to channel fairies into figurines. She would call them hobgoblins. And they would come to her in a dream, and she would make them into these like figurines. And one day, this 11-year-old girl started to get kind of a weird energy from one of the dolls, and she spoke to it, and she was like, what are you going to do next? And as soon as she said that, all of the pots and pans in the kitchen fell off of their hooks onto the ground.
Wow.
And so she always remembered that, and later, fast forward to now she's an adult, kind of like you, something later in life has kind of put her back down on a fairy path somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like thinking about fairies a lot, and she's folding laundry. And as she's folding laundry, she hears like a ting, and she looks, and there's like a bright, shiny dime that has just fallen onto the top of the dryer.
Wow.
And she's like, wait, did that just fall out of the pocket of these clothes I'm folding? And she's looking at it and she's thinking that. And then she hears like ting. And then a bright, shiny dime falls out of the sky and lands on her head.
It fell out of the pocket dimension.
and so she's like, okay, that just happened. Like it just fell out of the sky and onto my head. You know,
That's amazing.
a few weeks go by and she's like still thinking about this. And she's like, okay, if that was real, can you give me a sign? And as she says that, she feels a nickel materialize behind her ear and drop to the floor.
Wow. Such a sense of humor. That's amazing.
But again, 3 coins. And, you know, she also described the coins as being remarkably shiny and untouched, which is so interesting. Are they just taking them when they're newly minted, when that's the most appeal because they're shiny, and they've just kept them in another dimension where they don't age?
Perhaps.
A significance of numbers? I don't know.
Well, you know, I do think 3 is a spiritual number. You know, it's a creative number. It's a divine connection number. So I do think that is important.
It's interesting. Like I said a moment ago, I can feel this like burst of contained knowledge that you're giving a really good job articulating. And I totally feel it like empathetically. Like, again, I will say Bonnie and Therese were an illuminating pair of people to talk to back in season 1, to say the least. And the themes that they have independently brought forward have come up numerous times from people that don't know them, which is very confirming for them. And then, you know, now here I get the blessing and privilege of talking to you here today. So, okay, now carrying on. So you see this fairy. I'm honestly right here with you. So you show your husband, you're like, okay, holy F, you know, here we have a fairy. Wow. What happens next? Like, how do you continue to progress to where we get here today, you know, to sounding like you sound today? What were the next stages?
Well, at that same moment in South Carolina when I saw the fairy that you've seen the picture of, TikTok had just started for me. You know, during the pandemic, people started getting on TikTok. Well, I found this lady very early on who became a mentor to me, a spiritual lady, and she taught me how to do journey meditation. And so I started doing that. And so I started having experiences with the fairies in my meditations. And they also started to appear to me. They would watch me while I was sleeping. And, you know, sometimes when you wake up right before you're completely awake, like there's that, I call it the in-between space. I would see them looking at me and I would wake up before I actually woke up and I would see them and they would jump because they were, you know, they were just so curious about me because of the interest that we were building between each other. And that's when I started, you know, writing down all of my journeys. And I started doing the writing outside where I would let them just take the pen and write for me with the automatic writing. And it's funny because when I do that, often it'll be in like a poetry form. But then I also had started doing something called infinity walking, and that's where you make an infinity sign on the ground, and it's certain measurements that you have to abide by, and you can walk. And the way that the infinity, if you follow this specific outline, it's the perfect way to walk to build all of your muscles perfectly and heal the body. Like it's a very spiritual type of exercise. And I started doing that outside in my yard. And one day I came out and they had laid this perfect crystal right in the center of it. They actually gave me crystals twice on that property. And they asked me one other time to not take photos of the entries to their homes. So I knew where specific entry points were. And so they asked me not to ever show those, you know, online, because I would always ask them, is it okay to share this with other humans? Because I'm trying to teach humans about your world. And so they were mostly 100% willing, you know, for me to share them, except for the entrances to their homes. They were very protective over that. And so, because I said yes and I had honored that, they gave me another crystal in front of one of the trees. So it's just been really an unbelievable journey. And now I have gotten. I'm not like Bonnie. Bonnie can talk to them directly and hear them like we're talking right now. Um, she has the most accomplished clairs that I've seen, with the, sort of channeling them. And so, Teresa and I can, both communicate to lesser degrees than Bonnie in that way. But I have learned a lot lately, and it's really been delightful. And in fact, when I left that property, one of the fairies accompanied me on my journeys, and her name is Sylvie. And I learned her name in a meditation. And I was told to look her name up. And when I did, because they told me Sylvie in the meditation, and that she was going to accompany me. And her name means of the forest. I had no idea that her name was going to mean of the forest. And so Sylvia accompanies me everywhere I go.
Let's go back to this crystal gift for a second.
Okay.
I get the scene. You've kind of walked out a figure eight or infinity sign in your yard. Where was the crystal?
It was in the dead center. Very precisely placed.
What's up with them in center placement? Do you know?
I don't know, but I've never thought of that, but you're right. There must be something to it. Maybe they just like the continuity of it, perhaps.
Just hold the phone a quick second here, Amy. With every completely illuminated thing you've just said, I think it's singularly fascinating that you've never kind of singled in on center placement. They put things in the center all of the time with everybody. I mean, I have heard literally, I'm not exaggerating, upwards of 50, 60 stories. Woman loses her wedding ring for 3.5 years, figures out she has fairies, asks for it back, opens the door. There's the ring on the center floorboard, right precisely in the center. Guy is meditating, watching TV, kind of half falling asleep, holding his remote control, wakes up, can't find it, looks for it forever, vacuums his entire house, does a deep clean, finishes everything, turns around, it's in the center of the living room carpet where he just finished vacuuming. I mean, on and on I could go. So it's fascinating that that detail is accurate and consistent with your story. What kind of crystal was it?
It was like a piece of quartz, white quartz, and it was really beautiful. Oh, it's so shiny on it, just a gorgeous crystal. And I was thinking about why they would do center placement, and what popped into my head, and I don't know if this is true or not, but feng shui, the practice of feng shui. Perhaps it's something to do with the north, south, east, west, above and below. Maybe, it seemed that was what popped into my head, that there must be some reason, that has to do with the points of the compass, perhaps. I don't know. That's interesting. I'm definitely going to ask.
My intuition, not that I know, I mean, I'm not a fairy expert. I've said a million times, and I maintain that's still true. It's just to make sure that it's unmistakable, that this was intentional, part of it, Mm-hmm. If the object first disappeared and then reappears that way, I think that is doubly so. The point is to make sure that you have no ambiguity that this was supernatural, this event, because how could you have fucking missed it in the middle of your carpet or in the middle of the, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I've often said that, because they don't talk, just to kind of go back a quick second, Bonnie gives me such good feels. Shout out Bonnie and Therese. Shout out Therese. You're doing super hard work as a caregiver. There's lots of stuff behind the scenes that people don't see with the people that are on getting interviewed. These are all people still navigating real lives who are having these experiences. You, Bonnie, Therese, everybody, so.
Absolutely.
Shout out all the real people out there who are, just like you said, not exactly finding what they need from folklore and are kind of looking for what this means in 2026. But, okay, so back to this idea of center placement for a second. Here's kind of my 2 cents. If it's something that was first gone and then comes back, it might just be mischievous, or because they're not necessarily able to talk to people or break through the clairsentient, clairaudient barrier that most people are keeping up to keep that shit out. Because let's be clear, most people are just keeping that shit out. Doesn't mean
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the real difference between those that are guests of the show and those that are not. Is just almost a degree of intentionality of blockage is underway in the balance of the population who doesn't understand this stuff. But I digress. But anyway, so center placement is kind of like, okay, the thing goes, and now you're looking, and so now they've changed your brain state into like confusion, and then when it returns, it's astonishment. And if you have any bit of intuition functioning about you, you're not just going to accept that as a random event. You're going to get stuck on it. And they have just introduced themselves to you. Now you know they're there, but they didn't break your mind in half by showing up in your head as a voice or showing up as a visual image that you can't explain to others. But you can validate and verify an object that went somewhere and then came back, right? So it's meeting you halfway, but also breaking reality while doing it. I think it's a gentle introduction or a wedge that they're kind of tapping in to kind of open you up to their existence. And if at some point the irresolvable paradox of where did that thing go and how did it come back there does its job, you might find yourself saying, okay, whoever that is, can I have it back, next time?
Right.
At which point you've made contact, you've been introduced, now you're talking to them. That's what they wanted. They want a relationship. I think that's true what you're saying about their curiosity about humans.
Oh, yes, definitely.
If you are out there and this stuff is happening to you with disappearing and reappearing objects, I'm just going to call it, you've got a good heart and the fairies want to have a relationship with you. They're not doing it to bad apples. Definitely not. I don't think I've heard a single person come forward with object communication taking place that is a fucking asshole or a fuck up. It's usually people that have paid their dues emotionally through the journey of life and have come out the other side a complete soul. God bless, the fucking miracle that is, and are now worthy of the Fae attention. And I don't know. They do have an internal morality about whom they interact with. Much like you and Bonnie and Therese are protective of your circle, I think that the Fae are kind of protective of who they show themselves to. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true. And I think that just like that book was healing with the fairies, I think often when they see that a spiritual awakening or healing is taking place, when you've begun the shadow work, when you've begun the spiritual work, I think that they want to come in and sort of assist with that because they understand the true nature of the universe. They understand the true interconnectedness of all things because that is the way that they live with nature and with the earth and with the elements. And so I think that when they see that, and there are certain fairies that are healers, and, that is their mission, basically. Fairies are born knowing pretty early what they're here to do within the fairy circles and within the universe as a whole. And we often, between Bonnie and Teresa and I, we talk about the guardians. And a guardian is born a guardian. It's kind of like a tree. They know exactly who they are, and they know what their mission is. And so the fairy community, they sort of allow that fairy child to grow up learning and experiencing what their job is going to be. But they view their jobs with such joy, and there's so much, because everybody is doing exactly what they're supposed to. There's very little laziness. There's very little feelings of disgrunt. There's very few fairies are disgruntled. And what they do when someone does start to feel a more negative emotion or is going through something, emotional, the fairies just surround their fellow and just basically love them up and show them how important they are to the whole and remind them They actually have a practice for that, an actual, they've told us about it. It's a fairy circle practice where, for someone that is going through that. It's very rare that a fairy would be asked to leave the community because of ill behavior. Um, it does happen, but very rarely. So, like I said, they do have free will, but because of the way that they have learned to appreciate everyone as a part of the whole, that happens very little.
You know, I have to say, I'm having a really great time talking with you. Thanks for carving out some of your day to do this with me today. Thanks a lot, Amy.
Oh, of course. No, I enjoyed this so much.
Shout out Bonnie for a quick second with her family portrait of fairies, where they kind of superimpose themselves literally in a portrait frame on a leaf. I think you might know which photo I'm talking about of Bonnie's.
Yes, I love that photo.
That photo has stuck in my mind since the time I saw it. Also, shout out Bonnie's photo of that little boy up in the tree. What's going on with that guy?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen the one that Therese took of the fairy dog, or it almost looks like a wolf?
Absolutely, I've seen that
That's
one.
that's one of my favorites. I absolutely love that one. And so just to let your listeners know, so when you begin this journey of taking fairy photographs or recognizing them in your nature photos, they're going to look, like you said, superimposed against the framework of the photo of nature. So they might look like their skin is made of bark. They might look like they're a leaf or a twig. Their legs might look twiggy or something. But you will clearly see, and it's because of that energy thing we talked about, that it is a actual being. And I have I have a TikTok, if anybody's interested in checking that out later, of all the animals, the fairy animals that I've taken pictures of. And some of them are so clear. And one of the things that we've learned about the animals is that a lot of them are wise advisors, like a snake in fairyland, if you will, is a wise advisor. And the dogs have different abilities. And they're the ant people. There's ones that look like ants. I have a really good picture of an ant person, and they take people on journeys through the forest. So all of them have a specific job that they love doing. They were meant to do this work, and I find it really fascinating. I would love to do another episode with Bonnie and Therese and teach you about the different types of fairies that we've learned about.
I'm actually so encouraged in a way, and I haven't mentioned this yet, that Bonnie and Therese are still doing their stuff and that they've got you as part of the crew now too. It's grown. That's amazing. Honestly, what a cool synchronicity. I know I said that earlier. I don't know what else to say. That's the right word, I think, for this one. So let me ask you then, okay, so you mentioned like you began meditation and you began to develop some clair abilities. Tell me about that. Like, how did that emerge for you, and what kind of contact other than Sylvie, have you made? Like, when did you start to get knowledge firsthand? I'm really curious about how that progressed for you.
Well, for me, like I said, I would do the automatic writing, and I would just, during meditation, a lot of the information came from meditation. And it's funny because Brigid actually showed up in my meditations, and she would ride in on a horse, and she would be accompanied by a fairy man who was a guardian. And she would give me information that I was able to go look up and kind of confirm some of the elements of what she was telling me or teaching me. And Sylvie has appeared in my meditations. Sylvie has actually, Sylvie has done some amazing things with me that involved healing. And Brigid, she is very closely involved with the fairies. So I love to reference some of the old writers like Origin, like we were speaking of, and a few others that truly believed that these beings, like the gods, basically, that were worshipped by what would be called pagans, were just kind of like the same category of beings of the fairies, and sort of like a in between angels and humans. And so, you can start to match up everything with the different modalities and different people from around the world, and it'll have a similarity with their gods and goddesses. But Brigid definitely was the one that appeared to me, and she was always accompanied by fairies. And, she has taught me a lot. I have tons and tons of notes about the fairies and the things that I've learned just by myself through journey meditation.
One of my other guests has also described automatic writing practices and having some interesting results. So when you're doing automatic writing, you're letting yourself basically become a vessel for the Fae to communicate through.
Yes.
In your experience of it, and by the way, there's never any gotcha moments on this show. When I ask questions,
of course,
I'm asking because curiosity begs, and I also think like more information for the listeners that help them open up pathways of potential contact are good to explore. So I get it, the idea of automatic writing, but I'm asking, just kind of curious, when it's happening, are you kind of aware it's happening? How does it feel when it's going down?
Well, it's kind of like when you get yourself into meditation and you kind of I'll go sit outside with them, I'll ground to the earth and I will have my pen and paper. I have a little journal that I write in. And sometimes I've even later, after, it helped to have the pen in hand or pencil in hand. But later I was able to do it through typing. And I just kind of let my mind go blank a little. Like I don't consciously think the thought and just let it flow. So sort of going into flow state, if you will, if you've ever experienced flow state, that's kind of what it's like. It's almost like a aware meditation. Your eyes are open, your hand is moving, but you're just allowing a flow state rather than thinking about what you're going to say.
I don't know. For me, I'm such a highly analytical person. My brain never fucking stops. And I'm
right.
I'm very traumatized still. I mean, like, I'm still walking around with 2 canes. It's been 4 years now since the police assault. So my hypervigilance is still really high, and I'm still just kind of like all fucked up from it. But thanks to my good friend marijuana, I keep an even
right on
an even keel. But I do find for myself, I just have a super hard time getting into meditative states because of pain and.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I always recommend guided meditation for people that, struggle with meditating. When you do a guided meditation, and I have an excellent one that I could send you that's on YouTube that I use constantly because of the drum beats. To me, drum beat meditation is the best way for someone who struggles with meditation to get into it, because drum beats are very primal. And it's something that causes the parasympathetic nervous system, if you want to give it kind of a sciencey, explanation. And it allows your brain waves to begin to change into the type of brainwave you would need to have to meditate. So that's why drum beats are a really good way for anyone that struggles. And when you combine guided meditation with drum beats, it makes it a lot easier.
Okay, so I forgot to ask about the second crystal. I'll get back there, but just kind of shouting that out for everybody and for myself so I don't forget. But carrying on here, let's stick with this automatic writing for a second. So when you now kind of produce and then you go back and read, what are some of the things you've seen and learned through that method of contact? I'm really curious.
Well, can I read one of them? Because a lot of times it'll be in poetry form and it just flows. And I don't think about it, it just flows. So one of the ones that I wrote in 23, I called it Mountain Fairy Poem, but the curl of a leaf fallen from a canopy of trees, protective of this little slice of mountainside, covered in a tiny forest of myriad lichen and green moss, home to the fairy clan, hidden secret family, keepers of the woods and ferns and waters, unseen spring of magical liquid bubbling up from the earth's stores of treasure, healing and cleansing us even when we were unaware of the enchanted elixir contained in the water, healing not just to body but to spirit. Fae wise folk, keepers of the sacred flames of earth's fire, deep in Gaia's belly, tending the fires of her love, she loves us despite the harm, the pain caused by human hands. She desires to heat our cold hearts, warm our souls, awaken our own fire, the fire of freedom, the fire of plenty. She wishes to show us her secrets. The Fae already know. They are our teachers. I spoke to a tree today. I told the tree, I know you are alive, sentient. Please lower your branch, touch my hand, a sort of clasp, connection. The tree did this by whispering to the wind, fairy sprites dance through the air and aid the tree in completing this clasp of friendship. And so that's kind of the way they have taught me through poetry. And I actually went out after this poem was written and I began asking the trees to come down and touch my hand. And I would hold it lower than the branches. And the trees, now they do it all the time. And we call it our little handshake. But I'll go outside and just ask my tree friends to come down and touch my hand. It never ceases to amaze me. Like, I love it when they do this. But often, this is kind of like a free verse poem that I read a moment ago. But that's kind of how they'll teach me about how they are a part of, they tend to the earth, basically. And the earth, which is a sentient being as well, I'm sort of an animist. The earth wants to awaken our fires so that we will understand our place in the world and we will understand how important it is to, you know, protect the earth and be a part of that and be conscious of how we go about the world.
I gotta say something here, which, it immediately stands out to me. Number one, as you were reading that poem, I've been listening to you and hanging out with you here for a good hour. That poem does not sound like you, first of all. It is not your syntax. It is not your word choice. It does not sound like you. It sounds like another person wrote that.
I agree. Yeah. And this just flowed out of me. I did not think about it, or anything like that.
It's beautiful, but it does not sound like you. It does strike me as coming from another place. And I've learned, right? There's like so much stuff to stomach as a rational, critical thinking person as you try to wade into this pool of the fairy subject matter pool, such as automatic writing, such as clair auditory, such as photography of fairies. So, for me, like, I think that, firsthand visual sightings are still not as compelling somehow as like a crystal that just mysteriously appears, or object like the pennies in Harper's case, or, Jem's wedding ring, and so many others that have come on the show. But what is the why that those objects for me are so important is because absent those object things that happen, all of this could just be like a bunch of delusional people going blah, 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 right?
Right. Right.
It's when you get the objects involved that the tangible component of it somehow dominoes and validates all of the other stuff. And as your mind opens up to the reality of all of this, you get closer and closer and closer to both sounding like and being able to completely follow along with and accept somebody who sounds like you. But trust me, that is not where people who are just starting off are ready to go. It's a big, big leap to get to the point.
Oh, yeah.
Of much of the stuff that we've talked about here tonight. Going back again to the idea that you're very brave to come on the show. You're also incredibly articulate about a lot of this stuff. And I just am so fascinated about more of it. So, okay, that's enough out of me. I'm not even sure where I was going there. Usually I have a pretty good idea of what kind of point I'm trying to make, but hopefully in the edit, I'll find out what I was trying to say there.
Right.
Amy, let me go back to the second crystal just for a brief moment, if I could, please.
Okay. Yes.
The first one you find, what was your reaction when you found it? Did you know automatically this was a gift from the Fae, or did you have like...
Oh, yes, I knew immediately that it was. It was placed so perfectly, and like you were just, talking about earlier, it was so centered and perfect and so clean. It was outside on the ground, and so it wasn't, it wasn't covered. It wasn't, how if you found a crystal or a rock in the dirt, it would be covered in dirt stuck to it. It wasn't like that. It was just placed there like as if it were on a pillow, And so I knew that it was from them. And the second one was in front of one of the little fairy doors. And it was because I was protecting their home. It was a different tree than the original tree. It was over on the other side of the property. And there was water that ran alongside that property. And a lot of times from the roadways and from where it flowed from was near a highway. So if it rained, there would be a lot of trash and, human stuff that was thrown in there. So I would clean it up, and they were so happy. They actually told me this. They were so happy that I cleaned up that trash and cleared that water for them that it just absolutely, they were so grateful. And by that time, I had really been there for months, getting to know them. And they told me to go look. And right in front of the fairy door, there was a little crystal, and it was another quartz piece, but it was like a little square piece of white quartz. And, just amazing, just amazing.
Yeah, what a paradigm shifting moment for you to find gifts from them.
Absolutely.
You know, I I envy people that have received these fairy gifts. I truly mean that. Like if I was, it's funny. Harper still. I'm like, no judgment on this show, but she's like, for a while I carried the 3 pennies with me in a little bag, like a good luck charm. And I'm like, yep, that seems right. And then she's like, and then eventually I just put 1 penny each in different potted plants in my house. And to me, I'm like, save those pennies in a hermetically sealed jar for this,
Right. Yes.
for the day in which science wants them, And please, I'll, implore you, keep those crystals somewhere safe. Like those have been to another dimension. I'm sure of it.
Absolutely. Yep. And Bonnie and Therese both have had instances where the fairies brought things back because they asked them to, and so like items that have been taken by the young fae, because the fairies are very welcome in our homes. Like we have made that abundantly clear. But sometimes, the young ones, we actually had a whole meeting about this. The young ones will have a over exuberance, of excitement when they see shiny things. So, and it could be the most unusual things, like, it just doesn't matter what it is. It could be tools or coins or really a lot of jewelry. They really like jewelry because they love crystals and things. What I've noticed with gifts that I've given is that it needs to be something that's a real thing. Like they love things made out of metal, and they love crystal gifts. And then, like I said, they love things that you prepare with your own hands, or art that you do with your own hands, like tiny art. Like sometimes you could make something for them, and it's the energy of the gift. Because some people will say, well, I left them gifts and they didn't take them. But it's the energetic offering behind it, the love you put into it, which reminds us that when we prepare food and we're baking for our family or preparing meals, put love into it. When you actually consciously do that, even if you're not an experienced chef, it produces something in your food that is quite different and quite amazing. And it's not something that we can quantify with science. It is one of those things that is just spiritual, and the Fae recognize that sort of thing. But we can use this in other parts of our life.
There's the famous Japanese scientist slash art student who in the 1970s did a study where he put glasses of water in jars.
Oh, yes, yes.
And he would on one jar put a word like something like hate, and on another jar he would put a word like love. And then he would freeze this water in the exact same fridge, side by side, same water, same conditions. The only differentiating factor was the messaging on the bottle. And you would see that in the case of the bottle labeled love, there's these beautiful, symmetrical, gorgeous, interlocking ice crystals, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the one that says hate, the crystal structure is broken, defective, non-beautiful, basically. And truly, you can.
Yes.
This is not like a interpretive matter. You can clearly see the difference in how these ice crystals formed, and that is a replicable thing.
Absolutely. My therapist did this with. She took rice and put rice and water in 2 different jars, and then she would hand it to people in the room, and we could say positive things while holding the one, and then say negative things, put negativity into the other one, and you would not believe the difference. It was unbelievable. that one stayed really, intact and clear, and the other one was cloudy and dark, and just you could really tell a difference. And I think that makes us realize how, it's quantum. This is the quantum field that is all around us and connecting all of us. And that is why we can feel things. We get goosebumps when someone says something that resonates with us powerfully. We experience these different things where we can read the energy of the photo. And the ancient people knew about this. They understood it in a way that, I think modern man has kind of lost or forgotten. But we can remember. We can remember by doing these small things like we're talking about today.
Just this very conversation, Amy, is yet another flame igniting the listener and igniting that memory. Because, come on, I mean, we're almost 100 episodes into Fascinating Fae. There's no effing way that we're just talking to this many delusional people who have so
right.
And I mean, the emergent patterns of what Fae do, how they do it, why they do it, are kind of becoming undeniably obvious to anybody who's listened to the whole thing, in my opinion. I'm not the only dude in this party who's kind of putting it together. I really feel like, 99% of the audience of this show, which I have a great audience, I have to say, are following along. They're following the plot, So I really got to say, like, this conversation fits beautifully into this body of work. You've done a fantastic job here today. You continue to do a good job. I really believe and understand what's going on with you. It must be extremely exciting to have direct contact with Fae all around you.
Oh, it is. It's wonderful. And, I've been really fortunate that my husband, even though he's a skeptic, and my children, they have really supported me. I'm a mother of 7, and I have 5 grandchildren. So my young son, my youngest is 14, and the others are adults, but all of them sort of really support me. And when I have meetings with Bonnie and Therese, and when I do things like this, they're really great about supporting my work. And they even threw me for my 50th birthday, which wasn't this year, but not last year, but the year before. I had a fairy party, and they made me a fairy cake. And it was like a little fairy door, and it had Sylvie's name above it. It was so sweet. It was the most beautiful. Oh my, they went all out. They had someone build this gorgeous backdrop with roses and flowers, and made all of this fairy lights everywhere and candles. And it was so beautiful. And so I love that my family kind of supports this, because I do try to find that balance between being in the fantasy world all the time, if you will, and being firmly grounded in reality. And I like to merge the two and understand that, we need these spiritual and even fantastical things, but we also need to be grounded, and we need to, understand that we have to live in the world, like you said earlier, with Therese taking care of her parents the way that she does. And, Bonnie, she's gone through some health issues recently. So, all of us are dealing with real life things, but this can be such a wonderful piece of our lives. And it has to be important. To me, it's our calling. We were called to this work. I really believe that.
I feel that. I don't know. The three of you have a certain energy. Again, like, I don't think there's one particular archetype, and I don't think any one type of person is the type of person who can have fairy stuff happen and others can't. I do think it's something available to all. But those that are walking in it sound a lot like you. And that last sort of 3 minutes of what you just said was beautifully said. And in fact, a big half of this show for me is asking the question of, how are people dealing with this? If I may, I'll just quickly offer something here that will only make sense once both episodes come out, and I haven't published the other one I'm about to talk about. But I spoke to this woman named Melanie recently, who produced for me some of the most interesting photos I've seen. Like I said, you're up there, and she's up there too in my top 5. Shout out Brooke Morrison, Liz Webb, and there's a few others that I'll be remiss if I can't remember right off the top. But Anyway, so Melanie, has an incredible photo of a Bigfoot. And her story started by her finding like footprints and handprints coming up out of a mud hole when she was on a walk in a forest with her dog, following those muddy footprints kind of into the bush and then picking up the trail, following the trail like 2 miles back and uncovering a gigantic bone pile of maybe like 100 forest animals in a big picked clean bone pile. And she took them home and,
Wow.
and no skulls, but exactly. Wow. Like what? And she's incredible. She took them all. She went back 3 times and filled her trunk, took all these bones home and started to go through them piece by piece to see what she was dealing with. And she was like, it would be fair to say there was at least 100 deer, like at least 40 to 50 small mammal, like, but shockingly, no skulls. Right. And so what the hell was doing that, And so.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, that's a hell of an origin story for starting to take photos of shit. Right. And so.
Right.
Like, not that yours is not one hell of an origin story. Yours is great too, but hers is just like, okay, that's a weird thing to do. And what happens next gets even weirder, which is she starts to believe there's Bigfoot around her home. And just like you're saying, she asks one time, like, can I have a photo of you? And this Bigfoot steps out from behind this gate and she gets a photo of it.
Oh, wow.
She shared that with me. And I was like, now,
that's amazing.
Here's the point I'm trying to make, though. After listening to you and how your family is so supportive and making you a cake with Sylvie's name on it and just like really giving you support, in Melanie's case, despite all of this that I'm telling you, I mean, even like when she found the bone pile and she finally cataloged it all, she was just like obsessed. So she phoned the Park Service and she's like, I want to report this bone pile that I found. And they were like, excuse me, could you describe that? And she was like, yeah, this big bone pile, like about 100 animals. Where are you right now, miss? And they sent somebody out. 20 minutes later, 4 guys showed up, including the superintendent for the Forest Service, to come see, right?
Wow.
So she's got all that. And I swear to God, she tells the most heartbreaking story of how her own children, won't even let her show them this Bigfoot photo she printed out at a breakfast they're having at a diner together,
Wow. That is so sad.
Yeah, it's really sad. And so, part of the interest of the show, Fascinating Fae, one of the fascinations is what impact does this have on people's lives? How does it alter the trajectory of what's going on? Does it isolate them? Does it connect them? Does it leave them feeling crazy? My best friend took his own life. He was seeing this stuff and no one believed him. And I don't think he believed himself.
Right. Oh, wow.
So
wow.
It ranges. And I mention all this just to say that I think you're doing a really good job of being this close to it and being able to say what you just said there about balance and grounding. I really want to respect and acknowledge that. I think you're doing a good job of that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to respect and acknowledge your family for being there with you as you uncover this side of yourself and uncover this knowledge, because you're uncovering knowledge. You mentioned a second ago, like, you don't want to be in the fantasy world. I hate the word fantasy for this stuff. This is...
Right. Well, it gives you that Disney-esque feel,
Yeah, it gives you that trivialized feel, the word fantasy.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes. I fantasize that I'm going to go like, I don't know, discover dinosaurs on a crazy island off the coast of Costa Rica. But,
right. Or win $1 million. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
I get it.
Or marry Angelina Jolie or whatever. But that's not what fairies are. Fairies are a cohabitating, interdimensional, or even, not even like, I'm not even so sure. Can I just talk about interdimensionality for a quick second with you?
Sure. Absolutely.
Again, no gotcha moments on this show and no poking holes. So this is not in direct reference to anything you've been telling me. This is something that's come up so many times as I try to promote this show, right? I will get physics students and physics professionals telling me there is no evidence at all for the existence of alternate dimensions. You know, the Higgs boson large particle collider, right? They're bashing particles into one another and causing them to change phase states and do a bunch of funky shit, but they can't ever detect missing material. So even though all this crazy, you know, quantum level phenomenon is taking place, there's no stuff going somewhere and there's no stuff coming from somewhere that is detectable. And outside of a couple of small parts of quantum theory, like string theory, which is a mathematical model of the universe that, you know, can't really be solved unless you start to hypothesize about extra dimensions in the equation. That's one of the only places in physics where there might be some, like, quote unquote evidence for another dimension existing. But there is one really weird one, which gets people stuck, because the force of gravity of the planet does not seem sufficient for the mechanics of it. Like, you can have a small little fridge magnet and it can overcome the gravity forces of Earth and pick up a paperclip, you know, from a table.
Oh, yeah.
That shouldn't really be possible by a lot of, you know, physics understanding. But a lot of people say that if you allow for the idea of another dimension, spreading the force of gravity out amongst these other dimensional planes, that would explain why gravity is somewhat weak, because it's being spread out across multidimensional planes. Now, for all the physics students and physicists listening, I know I didn't do a very good job of saying all that in the proper terminology, but that's about it. There's really no evidence for the existence of another dimension, which is why I'm starting to wonder, like, are the fairies even necessarily in another dimension, or are they just in this dimension with us and they can keep themselves hidden? I'm kind of curious how you really think about it when you imagine it or experience it. What's it like for you?
I think you might be onto something, because, you know, I know that one of the first things they ever said to us was that the sun falls on them, you know, the sunlight, and the rain falls on them just like it does us. But they are able to be invisible if they choose. And according to them, it has something to do with, if I remember correctly, it has something to do with they're able to speed up their like molecules, basically. They're able to, basically, they go clear or invisible because they're able to be flowing faster than we are, kind of like like on a molecular level. So, you know, I don't know how to say that scientifically, really, but it does have something to do with it. So it's possible that they are exactly in this dimension, but they do say that there's a way that they can, it's almost like they can pull things into where they're at and make them invisible too. So I don't know if maybe they just possess the ability to do that. I know Bigfoot can do that as well. In fact, Bigfoot kind of goes clear for a lot of people that see Bigfoot. Like, they'll literally see them disappear. Perhaps it's a portal situation. I don't know. You know, I've been very curious about this as well because of Bigfoot. That's really, I think I have Bigfoot on the property in North Carolina because I've seen all the tree structures, like really elaborate. I could show you photos of them that are just mind blowing, and videos that I've taken. I've never seen a Bigfoot yet, but I've let them know they're welcome, because I think they are, you know, the Cherokee talk about Bigfoot being the caretakers of the forest. They're forest beings, and they traded with them and lived in harmony with them. So, you know, I'm not sure about that. I do think there may be another dimension of some sort, though, but how that's laid out, you know, or structured, I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know either. And science, in my opinion, will eventually catch up to the correct hypothesis and testing method, and it'll all prove out. I do think it's kind of like another plane of existence, a very separate but interconnected place. One of the ways that I like to think about it sometimes is like light frequency is a good example. You can't really see UV light, But if you go into like a nightclub and they have a UV light on, you can see the effect of it on, everything white becomes shiny and it kind of has that funny look, right?
Right. Yes.
But with your naked eye, as you're cruising around, driving and doing stuff, you are completely unaware of the impact of UV light on your visual field. Doesn't mean that UV light's not there. Doesn't mean it's not doing its thing.
Exactly.
Right? It isn't until your eye, in this case, in the nightclub, is given the chance to change its focus so that you become able to understand, this is what UV light is. I can see it now. I can see its effects. So, the idea that an entity might be at a frequency that cannot be perceived is not that much different than a light spectrum band being at a frequency that can't be perceived.
Frequency. That's the word I was trying to think of. Yes.
Also like sound frequencies, you have about 2,000 to 20,000 hertz, which is the audible range of a human being. When a person gets older, the upper range, like the high sounds, like dog whistle kind of tones, become imperceptible. The ear just stops being as sensitive. It's older now, and it just doesn't hear that anymore. And so you can have these devices that they put in front of convenience stores that emit a very high frequency sound that sounds like a mosquito buzz, but very, very loud. And anyone who's like under, 25 is going to hear that noise and go like, what the fuck is that? And they're going to leave.
Yeah.
But older adults will not even know that it is there. They just simply will not hear it. That's another example of a frequency that is imperceptible to some, but perceptible to others. Fairies are doing something with frequency modulation, I'm pretty sure.
Absolutely. And you know what? That was the term that I was trying to express when I was saying that they speed up their frequency. And their frequency is going so much faster than ours, so they become imperceptible.
You said it really well earlier, I think. And for that matter, I think Bigfoot's a fairy. That's why I include him in the show.
Yes, you know what? It's so funny you're saying this because I had actually pulled out my little book, Bigfoot Observer's Field Manual. For some reason, I had it sitting here with my other books that I pulled out in case I needed to refer to them, because I was going to tell you about having the tree structures on my property. And, I do think that the Fae and Bigfoot are very closely related. I really do. And I think that, you can interact with Bigfoot in a similar manner to interacting with the fairies. Like, you have to be somebody of a high vibrational, mentality. You have to be somebody that cares about the earth and is somebody that is true, that is going to, if they say that they are going to do something, they'll do it to when it comes to the Bigfoot or the fairies. You can't be basically lying to them. Leaving gifts for them is a really good way to begin interacting. And they can read our field. They know who is going to be safe and who is not safe. And they can also recognize electronics. And the fairies can too, like your cell phone or your, like field cams or game cams. They know where those are and they avoid them. That's why we don't see them on too many of those things, because that's a big talking point with people that don't believe them. They're like, well, there's so many game cams out there now that they would have appeared on them all the time. No, they can recognize, like you were saying, through the sound frequency, that those things, where they're placed at. And so they avoid them. They know about our technology because the fairies have told us they have technology too. They've just learned not to be controlled by it like we are.
Amy, I just noticed we're kind of coming up on that 2-hour mark. And I'll tell you what, everything that you've said here tonight, literally everything deserves a pause and further discussion. You've been a fascinating and fantastic guest of the show. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done so far.
Thank you. Thank you.
But, around the 2-hour mark is usually when I try to navigate towards wind down mode.
Okay.
Out of respect for your time and out of respect for the audience's time. I have a great audience, like I said. When I look at my statistics, I'm consistently impressed at how big of a segment of the audience for the show listens through to the very end and sticks with everybody for 2 hours every week. It's great. So thank you also for all the audience participation that I get to enjoy. Okay, so shout out audience, shout out Bonnie Therese one more time. But Amy, here's what I'll do next. I will just kind of ask you my favorite question that I ask everybody that comes on the show. And
Okay.
following that, we'll just kind of, wind our way down to the end of the episode here in the next, 15, 20 minutes or so. No huge rush.
Okay. Sounds good.
Just before we get there, do you still have those 2 crystal gifts from the Fae somewhere safe?
I do. And I let my little granddaughter who lives with me, she has one of them in her room, and I have one hidden away.
Cool.
Yes.
The day will come when science comes calling for those objects to test them and add them to the, growing list of evidence of molecularly structure changed objects that came from the Fae dimension. I totally remember Therese asking for her glasses back and getting them in the middle of the fruit bowl.
Yes.
I remember her getting her necklace back, and also the narrative that Bonnie and Therese first put forward on the show. They're the first ones to ever offer the idea that you got to give the Fae 30 to 60 days notice if you're going to cut down their tree. And since I published that, a number of people have had a tree nearby getting cut down, remembered the Bonnie and Therese episode, have said, hey, you can come to my house. I mean, Ruby is a perfect example. Harper is a perfect example. And believe it or fucking not, after they do this, they all get object communication taking place among many other strange things.
Wow. That is amazing.
It's something that, like, when I first published the Bonnie and Therese episode, you got to remember, everybody, I'm a middle-aged white dude, I was like, this is not my wheelhouse, but after that fairy came into my wheelhouse, it certainly, oh, fuck, look what they just did there. That's so interesting. This is now my wheelhouse. Fairies. Funny. Captain Jim. I get it, fairies. You get my point, though? Like, I couldn't still believe them when I published it, but now a number of people have come forward hence and totally shared. After listening to Bonnie and Therese and seeing this tree cut down, I offered, refuge in my home, and then XYZ happened. And it's often like exactly like what Bonnie and Therese said, like necklaces returning. I mean, Ruby, when I talked to Ruby in season 1, and when she came on the show, one of her favorite necklaces went missing. I didn't talk to her for 2 years. She came back on season 2, told the story of inviting what she calls the family, who got displaced from the big tree out in front of her house that got cut down by the neighbors, into her home. Mm-hmm. And then after talking with me, she found the necklace, which had been missing for 2 years, underneath the little fairy altar that she had set up. It just impossible. You know what I mean? Like, incredible, impossible stuff. Begs the question, when the necklace went missing, are they doing it tricks with time? You know what I mean? Are they going back in time? Are they going forward in time? There's so many things, like I said, that you've brought up tonight that are consistent, findable in all of these episodes, no matter who's talking. I really believe everything you've said tonight. So all of that, momentum and acknowledgement behind us, here comes my question. Amy, what do you think fairies are?
I believe that they are elemental beings that are responsible for the flow of nature in this 3D plane. I believe that they are they are made of spirit, of ether, and they also have some sort of form. So I believe that they are the caretakers of the earth, just like the Bigfoot are the caretakers of the forest. So I believe they're very important to this plane. This plane of existence could not exist without them.
That's a really great answer, and I can hear that conviction and love in your voice for fairies. It's great to hear that answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, Amy, what a great time I've had here tonight with you. I feel that, like, uplifted, boisterous feeling that I get sometimes when I talk to guests. You're totally touched by the Fae. I can feel it. What I'm going to do next here is I'm going to do some housekeeping. And after that, I will give you the very last word on the show. So just hang tight and think about a sign off for a second here while I do some housekeeping, if that's cool with you.
Okay, that's perfectly okay with me.
Well, Amy, thank you again for being here tonight. For everybody listening tonight, you've been listening to Fascinating Fae, and I am your host, Jim. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on the show, if you've had a journey of understanding and you're now taking fairy photography and you'd like to come on the show, shoot me an email, encounters@fascinatingfae.com. I will be certainly happy to receive your email, and I'll definitely get back to you as well. You can also find the show on social media at Fascinating Fae, wherever you look, and I'm happy to receive a DM if that makes you feel more comfortable as a way to reach out as well. For example, Amy and I here chatted on Facebook first, so it's totally cool to do that with me. With all that encouragement for more stories and people coming forward aside, I will say this, which is that, Amy, on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners tuning into Fascinating Fae tonight, a super big thanks to you for coming on the show from North Carolina. I've had a great time. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate it so very much.
You are absolutely welcome. It was my pleasure to be here and to talk about one of my favorite subjects. And, I think a good way to end this conversation is just to remind people that the way that I began working with the Fae is through loving and protecting the earth, cleaning up trash, literally getting a bag, going out in my neighborhood and cleaning up trash. That was the very first way that they began to notice me. And they want to heal whatever needs healing. That's literally a quote from them. We want to heal whatever needs healing. We want the whole to be healed. And they want us to understand that we have to begin to see ourselves as a part of the whole, as one big entity, connected to the earth, connected to the Fae, connected to each other. And if one person is hurting, then we're all hurting. And that's kind of the message that they have given me throughout my experiences with them. They've told me before that when my friend pops into my head, reach out to them, see if they need my help, see if they just need a kind word. Sometimes people just need to be acknowledged. And these are the kind of things, this collective consciousness idea is what they have taught me. And you will grow in awareness if you just have the desire to begin to communicate with the Fae. Let them know, speak out loud. You don't have to do it, obnoxiously. Just go out, take a walk in a park in your yard. Even if you have the tiniest little scrap of a yard, if there is nature there, the fairies are there. And they love to be welcomed by the humans. So that's it, I guess. That's what I wanted to say.
Of wisdom that happiness cannot be bought or sold. You showed me how to find a balance and smile as life unfolds. Taught me how to judge what's real. There's more that glitters than the gold. And though we now embark on different paths, you'll be my good friend until we both grow old. I wish you smooth sailing through everything in your life. May you go through easy in the day and night. And when it's all over, remember the ways of the age. I'll be thinking back to these as the good old days. some words of wisdom, that happiness cannot be bought or sold. You showed me how to find a balance. And smile as life unfolds. You taught me how to judge what's real. There's more that glitters than the gold. And though we now embark on different paths, you'll be my good friend until we both grow old. I wish you smooth sailing through everything in your life. May you go through easy in the day and night. And when it's all over, remember the ways of the age. I'll be thinking back to these as the good old days, 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 as the good old days.
The meetings have grown, and they're probably about, I don't know, between 20 to 40 Fae that come to the meetings weekly. Wouldn't you say, Bonnie?
Mm-hmm. On your side,
Yeah.
and on my side, it's maybe about 15.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, back up to my introduction to fairies. I was skeptical at first. And there was a lot of things that happened that proved to me that all of this was really happening. And I'm going to tell a story about when I lost my crystal necklace, because that was the first wow moment for me that really blew my mind. There's been many since then, but this particular one, I house sit for my daughter a lot, who likes to travel, and I house sit for her cats and her house. And that particular weekend, left my crystal necklace over at her house, and it's one of my favorite necklaces. And she couldn't find it. My daughter looked everywhere for it, and she couldn't find it. And I was so heartbroken over losing that necklace. Heartbroken. Now, I need to back up a little bit because I forgot to tell you that I have a wonderful fairy friend named Jocelyn, and she is one of my house fairies. We all have fae that live in our house, and Jocelyn is with me all the time. She helps me a lot. She helps me through when I'm not feeling good, when I'm sad, and she's probably sitting listening to me right now. Well, she must have heard me so upset over losing this necklace. Um, One day I was cleaning my room and I found the necklace hanging in a spot that I would have never put it. It just showed up. So at the following meeting, I asked Jocelyn, and she said yes. She went over to my daughter's house and found the necklace for me and brought it home. So that was the first wow moment for me in regards to complete proof that these beautiful beings are surrounding me daily.
What up, bro? So I kept like almost sending this to you and then not sending it, but I do think that you should know because it's an important clue. This is the necklace that I talked about on the show that had gone missing in season 1, and then you were like, oh, they'll give it back to you, and then they did. Okay, so about 6 weeks ago, they took this and my bracelet that you can see in the photo. That's a protection bracelet that I made. Sorry, I'm out of breath. Woo, been clean. But I do think that you should know because it's an important clue. This is the necklace that I talked about on the show that had gone missing in season 1. And then you were like, oh, they'll give it back to you. And then they did. Okay, so about 6 weeks ago, they took this and my bracelet. Because also they took the chain. The gold chain was for my grandma. I know when they took it too. They took it when I was in the bath. I know exactly where I put it. And then I was just like pissed. I was like, God damn it. Like, really? You're going to take fucking this, you know? And I didn't know they took the bracelet. But so a few weeks go by. And then I have like a clairvoyant vision about the neighbors. And I see that the mom and the little girl that live underground, they like flash before me looking very rainbowy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the little girl has it. That's okay. Like, that's really cute. But I was still like, I want it back, right? So some more time goes by. And then I find waiting for me on the foot of my bed an index card and a pen that I had used for a spell. This was way back when they took my earplugs. And I had done a spell. I had had one earplug returned to me, and I was like waiting for the next earplug to show up. I'm like, the other one's going to show up, right? So on the card I had written, can I have my earplug back? And then when I got it back, I had shoved it somewhere. I don't remember where, but so anyway, then I'm butthurt about my necklace, and then I'm walking into the bedroom, and lo and behold, the index card and the exact pen I use on that spell is just sitting there. And I'm like, oh, my kids did this, you know. And then it's like, well, okay, sure, but that's really fucking weird. So I crossed off earplug, and I wrote necklace, and I put it on the fairy shelf. And then I had like a whole, you know, kind of realization thing and working on myself, that kind of thing, whatever. And then they gave it back to me. I came out of the bath again, and you can see where they placed it was underneath this cabinet that I have. It's actually my magic oven, my magic easy bake oven, that whatever spells I do go inside of there. But I have to turn it backwards because of my children. They'll get into it, right? So it's sitting underneath there, both the bracelet and the necklace.